think to be able to understand how much we have advanced in a few years, it's important to remember, as Françoise Girard explains very well, that the terms sexual or sexuality were a taboo and terms completely avoided at intergovernmental level until 1999. It's then that for the first time in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we find these terms in relation to provisions related to sexual abuse and sexual exploitation. Nonetheless, this marks a complete departure from a former approach to sexuality and the application of human rights standards to sexual matters. From there, we see a surge on the appointment of experts to monitor topics such as child pornography, trafficking on women and children, violence against women. However, these mandates that are mainly the result of political processes in a body that was called the Commission on Human Rights and now is the Human Rights Council also are the symbol of a different way of operating when you want to introduce a topic at human rights level. So traditionally, the civil society would have lobbied to have a topic introduced in the agenda to become a convention that the states will ratify and some body will monitor the compliance of states parties with that treaty. We are seeing how the civil society is using more and more political bodies that of easier access to introduce these matters that the states actually don't want to codify at any price. With sexual rights, reproductive rights, and very much with gender identity, a big improvement has been the creation of the Universal Periodic Review in 2006. Basically, the states have agreed that they will monitor each other every 4.5 years, and they will all report on how they are doing in their human rights compliance, and other states will ask questions and issue recommendations that the state under review might or might not accept. So when we arrived at the first session in 2008, straight away one of the first states under review was Ecuador. And one of the first recommendations that was formulated in this context referred to the decriminalization of some crimes, in particular sodomy, and other rights related to sexual reproduction and sexual rights.
There are reports of incidents of abuses and torture, as well as cases of alleged harassment and death threats against the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, and transvestite community and their leaders. What is the government's commitment to non-discrimination on grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity?
A big opposition existed from states, particularly Egypt, who claim these issues could not be debated in a human rights bodies because they were not human rights issues. A full negotiation followed, and it was agreed that if a state was happy to consider these issues as part of the human rights agenda, the other states could do nothing to stop it. So we have gone to a point where, having a topic that was absolutely taboo in the United Nations system, we have moved to 26% of the thousands of recommendations made between 2008 and 2011 have been related to sexual rights, health reproduction rights, and sexual orientation. From these two, it has to be said there's a lot of reticence on accepting these recommendations, and only about 12% of them have been accepted. The topics that have been raised the most is the ratification of important international instruments, gender equality, gender-based violence, and women's human rights, but also family planning, early pregnancies, sex work, and sexuality education. It's also about the impact that this seems to have in a domestic level. So it is very early because this is a very new mechanism that started operating in 2008, but we know already that countries like Azerbaijan have, as a result of this process, increased the marriage age to 18 years old, and they have criminalized the act of forcing women into marriage. Botswana has also reported that they passed a domestic violence act providing legal remedies to victims of marital rape, and the Republic of Korea reported prosecuting cases of marital rape. So Cuba, another example, has introduced in the national curriculum sexuality education, and in Pakistan, one of the most difficult countries, has also introduced a legal amendment to criminalize forced marriages, child marriages, and other customary practices that are discriminatory towards women and girls. So in addition to what this means in the field for human rights, I think an important lesson to learn is how a political mechanism that nobody had much hope about because it was only about states monitoring other states have yielded important results, not only on how good the implementation was, but on how it is possible to introduce topics that are very difficult to introduce in other tables of negotiations through the United Nations Human Rights Council.